So
Yeah.
this is a continuation call from last time about mindfulness of eating. So how's it going for you?
Well, it haven't been perfect, of course, but it's a learning activity. But it's been surprisingly effective or easy. Uh, Usually, when I eat, I just eat until I'm filled, and so fast that the the full reflex have no
Well,
time to activate.
you probably are eating in the habit that you developed when you were a child.
Yeah, child, or at least somewhere earlier than I can remember.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
So this
it's
is going to take some mindfulness. That in fact, congratulations for remembering to practice mindfulness of eating, because actually mindfulness of eating is to remember, and that the important point is to remember it before the meal starts, before you take the first bite, that this is going to
yeah,
be a mindful meal. I'm going to remember this one. I'm going to remember every bite, etc., like that. And then you can begin to take pleasure in it. That this is actually a quite more pleasurable way of eating. Have
than
you
the
noticed that?
yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have the that compulsion. It's just
Well, is the here's the question: is the compulsion pulling you forward, or is it pushing from behind? Playing with the word propulsion here.
uh, not propulsion,
This is
compulsion.
it is not the same thing.
But if I have to look at that way, from behind, I would say.
Okay. In TA, they call it a driver, and that we're often driven by the habit of the way that we have been behaving, and that basically it works with a trigger. And so, for in the past, the trigger was, "Oh, here's food, let's do it." Now we're going to start having other triggers in there. Is, "Oh, this is a time, this is food, but now it's a time to be mindful." And so we pick up the mindfulness and start working with that, and with actually the intention of really enjoying the food. Here's an example of very typical. People will have, it's generally a cold drink rather than too hot. Regardless of how good coffee is, when it's too hot, we can only sip at it. But
Yeah,
let us say a glass of milk or orange juice or Coca-Cola or whatever like that that people like, they will actually uh, almost open up and pour the liquid in rather than taking a little bit in the mouth and swishing it around and get the real good, delicate flavor. They get that same good, delicate flavor while they've been drinking a glass or two glasses of it rather than just a mouthful or a sip.
yeah,
So make sure that when you're drinking that you're not opening the gullet so that the milk goes right past, that you only take enough milk or orange juice or whatever it is that you're drinking so that you can hold it in your mouth and then play with it and enjoy it and get the benefit out of it that you were wanting when you were gulping.
and that goes for water too.
Yes,
All right.
but it more so with sugared drinks, so that we don't need so much of it, that we can get all of that pleasure in just a mouthful or two rather than a huge gulp or two.
Yeah, the only sugar drinks I drink is juice. But I get the point. It's just the same exercise or practice.
Yes, exactly so. Well, with the same, let us say, the skill, with the same skill, and with the same outcome, and that is the enjoyment of having a little. That we learn to enjoy having just enough, because we've been taught our whole life is if if this much is good, then more than that is better, and more than that is even better. And this is where our world has turned, which causes us to hoard, to keep things that we no longer need, to hold on to material possessions, etc., like that. So the way that you eat, that we've been talking about, is also a reflection of how you consume all of the material goods that you consume. And so taking a look at one's own materialism is a good thing. That we started out with just a stone, and that stone was used to break open a bone that had marrow in it that the wolves couldn't chew down to. And so that was our first tool. Now, we know that apes make tools. There's quite a variety of tools that some chimpanzees and apes make, especially getting grubs, worms out of a hole. But the important difference is that they don't retain their tools. It's only humans that retain the tool and keep it. Oh, this is a good thing. This stone is a really good one. I like this stone. I'm going to keep it. That's clinging. That very idea of grabbing a hold of something and holding it as if it were mine is tanha, or is materialism. But we take our materialism even to mental states. But it's grasping and holding on to the things that made life convenient, or in some cases like this, survival. That we needed that stone for survival. Without it, we wouldn't have been able to eat today. So we cling to things like that. That we need all of that material possessions that you've got on your shelves behind you, and
Yeah,
all of that stuff, because that helps you survive. So the story goes.
yeah, I see that.
And so the materialism now is to begin to take a look at what would be sufficient. To just enough material possessions, just enough food, just enough clothing, just enough housing, just enough medical attention is all we need. And yet our society says, oh no, go work more, get a bigger house, get more clothes, go buy this, go buy that. Go be worried about your medical attention. Go feel bad and go work some more. That's the whole society's way of looking at it. That, and it's built into the idea that we need things, which means that we're not good enough on our own, putting us back into the attitude of a victim.
Yeah, it's the clinging to our selves.
Ultimately, that's what it is. I identify with that rock, so that rock is now my rock, and I need it to survive. And so
Yeah,
that kind of delusionary thinking takes over when we're children. And then we continue to think in those same ways, and we get a lot of support from the society that way. So, with your mindfulness, as you're beginning to wake up, mindfulness of eating and mindfulness of drinking, you can begin to look at mindfulness of all kinds of consuming. That the West has turned, each country has turned its citizens into consumers.
yeah, it's not good for the planet.
It's not good for what?
It's not good for the planet.
Actually,
Overconsumptions.
yes, it's actually not good for anybody.
No.
It's not good for the landfill. It's not good for the trash collectors. They'd rather have less trash to take out. The only ones who get benefit from it are the ones who own the factories and the merchandising systems that keep us in a state of consumption. But the Dhamma is taking us out of the state of needing things and consuming them into the states of satisfaction so that we become satisfied with how things are now. Being satisfied with what one owns is a really, really good way of staying out of the store.
Yeah, I've noticed myself in the recent years since I began meditating that craving for things and stuff has significantly reduced.
Excellent. That's a good sign, a good show that the Dhamma is remembered, at least often enough so that the materialism comes down. Now, here's the point. When we feel satisfied with the material possessions that we have, even people who have a lot of money and spend it ostentatiously, they still don't feel like that they've got enough. They're not satisfied. They want more. Even the richest man in the world wants to be even more richer just to make sure that second place can't catch up. And they make it a competition. And not only that, but they make it a survival issue. They
Yeah,
make it.
I guess I can see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
um, because any feeling of satisfaction, no matter how good it feels in the moment, it never lasts.
Well, never mind. Bring it back again.
Yeah, but if your life depends on external
I
triggers,
know exactly, but that change of attitude is monumental in one's life. It
yeah,
will change your whole life when you begin to be satisfied with how things are. Then we don't strive nearly so much. In fact, we see striving as quite painful and useless. That when people strive for things, all they get is things, and then all they get is more striving for more things. But they never become completely satisfied and happy with what they have. The Buddha, in fact, even talks about this in the form of power. That real power is not exercised by having a lot of money to throw around and making people do what you want them to do because of the money that you can give them or withdraw. But because the wealthy one, whether he withdraws that money or gives it to the person freely, he's still one is not making really good friends with that person, and two, he's still dissatisfied. That he never comes to a state of complete happiness, even though he's exercising power on the political level or whatever. But real satisfaction, that's power, because the power is within. And that's why it's called idiopada, or part of the. There's another word, bala. The word bala actually means power. Um, but idia is often referred to as spiritual power, but the Hindus have taken that as into the world of magical powers. We're not talking about magical powers, and we're not talking about external worldly powers. We're talking about the power of one's own mind to feel the way you want to feel without regard to what's happening on in the world. That is an internal power. and that there's several of the words that are used to describe this idiopata. First off, the base, the pada on idiopata is called the base, and there are four bases of power.
Mm.
One of them is right effort, right mindfulness, right investigation. There we go with the Eightfold Noble Path again.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And that it gives, so the basis of power, what are the words that we would use for power? One of them would be success. In fact, that's the most important one, the big one, to feel successful. And so when you recognize that you put yourself into a state of fear or grief or whatever, and you can catch it, then that's power. We can say, aha, I caught you. I'm going to change my attitude from being a victim into being a winner. I'm going to be successful in this moment. And then a bigger success along the way is when we can say, no matter how obstructed the mind gets, I can clean it out. It's an I can do, or it's a can do attitude, the attitude of success. That's real power. Why? Because those who have no success are suffering and they're in a state of victimhood. And so they want to find someone with power so that that person will be magnificent or what benevolent and give them the feeling of power. No, the feeling of power comes from within, and it comes through this feeling of success. And when we cultivate that it's actually a skill that needs to be cultivated. And when we bring that feeling of success up to a high standard, then this is what we would call piti or rapture. Is when you become blown away with how good you are at remembering.
Yeah, in my experience with PT or the various forms of it is it it's kind of like on the base of everything. But
Success, exactly. Well, it's the base of one's spiritual power. Um, or let us say that if you're going to meditate, hoping that something good will happen, and you meditate, sometimes really strenuously meditate, for hours, days, months, and years, what's the point? Because the person who does that kind of stuff will only get small surface level things out of it because he really hasn't changed his attitude. His attitude is the power will come if I do enough meditation. He's looking for a business deal with the karma machine. If I put my time in, the karma machine is going to bless me and give me the good feelings. But that's not going to happen. We have to cultivate them. You have to cultivate the feeling of success. And by cultivating this feeling of success and cultivating the attitude, just like with mindfulness of eating, you're cultivating the attitude that, yes, you can slow down. You can enjoy your food. You can be the master of that bowl rather than its victim.
yeah, and it's powerful too.
Yes, exactly. That's what we're talking about. That's real power. The second one on top of that, with besides success, would be satisfaction. Because it is possible to feel success, but it's not good enough success.
Yeah.
So we have to blend those two. And when we have satisfaction along with success, now we're getting to the point of, let us call it homeostasis or equanimity, because we're no longer subject to the vagaries of the world. And the way that I would look at that is by talking about it in the sense there's some other words in there, and that is not just success and satisfaction, but also safety and security.
Sapient.
Safety,
Oh,
safety.
Yeah.
Security, because that power is there in one's own mind, and we feel both successful and satisfied. With that comes safety and security. We no longer feel afraid. That we can manage our fear to the point of it being not existent, especially when we start dealing with the fear of death. Because after all, if you're no longer afraid of death, what's there to bother to be afraid of?
Yeah.
And so we become fearless in that way. We feel safety because of this feeling of success and satisfaction. And then to top it all off, we begin to see that all the materialism that is around is certainly more when I accumulated it than I need now. And so we actually begin to see ourselves as wealthy. We've got too much. We've got superfluous income. And that feeling of wealthiness goes hand in hand with the feeling of generosity. So if you start to practice generosity, and there's a dozen different ways to do it, so long as you start to do it mindfully, there's a lot of different what you could call spiritual exercises. But mindfully, if there's um, homeless or vagrants that you see from time to time, give them $1. Do so happily with a smile. Tell them to have a good day. Or if you share a refrigerator, just buy some stuff and put it into the refrigerator just to let it be there. See what happens. These are different things. If you live with a family, that doesn't work because they already know who bought it. So, practicing generosity, and also along with that, recognize when other people are practicing generosity so that you can be sure to give them the benefit of their generosity by being grateful for it. We stand in gratitude for things.
Yeah, I see that.
All right. And so, with gratitude and generosity, to help develop the skill of feeling wealthy. And that's the top one. So we start with success, we blend in satisfaction. Along the way comes safety and security. But then that last thing to develop, maybe not the last, but the crown of it, would be to develop generosity so that you feel wealthy. You feel like you've got enough. You really feel like you got everything that you need. And now the satisfaction finally comes home. Is when you feel absolutely wealthy.
And
And these are feelings.
yeah, I suppose so. Uh, to me, it seems that all of these different practices, mindful eating and generosity, and how circle around one main point, and that is to reduce the sense uh, of a vulnerable ego, a self needing things and
Mm-hmm.
actually just existing.
Actually, if we are driven to eat, then that means that there is some dissatisfaction. When we eat quickly, it's like because we're starving or the habits or whatever like that. But when we begin to eat mindfully with satisfaction, that means that we are now satisfied. We're not in that state of dissatisfaction.
Yeah,
This
so
is
we're
why
not.
it's a that's dukkha. Dukkha is dissatisfaction.
Yeah, so when we're satisfied, there is no I need this, I must eat, I love this, I have to get it. It's just eating.
Hmm. Right. This morsel is great. The one that's being chewed on right now, this is good. And if it's not, then I can take it out.
Yeah.
Mhm. So that's the way to look at it. Always coming to this present moment. Always with the sati. Keep remembering to remember to eat slowly. To remember to taste, really taste what you're eating. Because that's one of the main reasons why people eat is because food tastes good. But because it tastes so good, they eat it really quickly, consuming it all and only getting part of the satisfaction because part of it was swallowed without it being fully tasted.
And I suppose it's a good for concentration too.
Well, I would say yes, but we have to be careful with the word concentration. In this
Yeah,
case, I would say this it's okay to use this as a form of concentration or watchfulness
yeah,
or attentiveness or paying attention to. Uh, and that, yeah, we can call that concentration, but if it's right, noble, then that does not mean that it's shutting everything else out. That's one of
no,
the
no,
major
yeah,
right. That's one of the major qualities that you find with the word concentration is taking something out that's not needed or superfluous. For instance, frozen orange juice concentrate means they take the water out. Okay, so that when we concentrate that way, like wringing a rag out to get the water out, that's a kind of concentration, putting something under pressure, putting it in a small space. All right. But the different kind of concentration is to take that rag or that washcloth out completely in its place and let it cover a vast area. Because that kind of concentrate will actually get the job done completely. Wringing the cloth out is only going to get a little bit of the water out of it,
yeah,
but spreading it out. Okay, so using that as an example of two different kinds of concentration. So that we're actually paying attention, we're covering the bases, we're looking at the territory, we're actually enjoying that morsel of food, and we're enjoying the sensations of the taste, the sensations in the mouth, the rolling around of the morsel, and the tasting of it, and the various textures, and getting really involved with that food, with the idea that nothing is going to get swallowed until it's completely chewed up. And so that's the idea. And so we're kind of on guard to only let stuff after it's been completely chewed. And so we begin to swallow very slowly. We check stuff out a little tiny bit of the morsel, and then we let that one go. And then we chew around some more until we get something else that's satisfactory, and then down it goes. And after you do 4 or 5 or 6 swallowings, then you clean things out, and then you never mind, start again with the next bite. So this is a way of looking at it, and that is actually anapanasati with the tongue.
yeah. Actually, yeah, and that's I suppose what I meant.
Okay, excellent.
Language is it's failing from time to time.
Well, it's good to speak the Dhamma in many many different ways and venue and using different kinds of examples and from everything, because basically the Buddha Dhamma covers all of life, and life is just so huge, so tremendous. But the Dhamma itself is actually quite simple. But we can give many, many different thousands of examples of how to apply that. It's almost like string. String is really, really simple, but you can take a bunch of string together and make a rope. You can
Yeah,
even keep a ship from losing its port when you get a rope big enough. You can also make it very fine, small, and then make it into a thread, and you can sew clothing. There's all kinds of stuff to do with a string. All right, so that's it. But the stringness remains the same. You can actually
Yeah,
turn them into string noodles and eat them.
almost.
All right. So that's like the Dhamma. It's got so many different applications. So that everything that you do during the day can be then, if you have the intention for it, is to make that an anchor, especially if there's a source of feelings there. An example of that would be a cell phone, because you're going to lose that cell phone. It's going to croak. It's going to stop working someday. How are you going to feel about that cell phone the moment that you realize that it's a piece of junk, that it's dead meat?
Well, to me, I suppose it it wouldn't matter much, but not
But
too long ago it would. But I see the point. There is
right,
always
because you are not that cell phone. But
no.
the cell phone reminds you that it died, you will too. And sometimes people even bring it to the point of life and death. I know you're beyond that, but there is still some attachment to our physical material goods, and every one of them will bring you a level of grief. The question is, can you manage that grief? The answer is that if you don't attach much to it, then there's no grief much.
Well, but it's just habits.
Exactly. Exactly so. But using the cell phone is one example. Eating is another one. The way that we lay down and sleep in the bed is another example. The way that we sit, the way that we correspond with other people, the way that we decide to be friends rather than enemies.
Mm. So should I try to um, focus now on being looking for things to be mindful of? Look
Yes,
just look at the
absolutely.
big
Mhm.
pictures.
Look at the kinds of things that potentially can cause you suffering and then put those on the list of start to watch for, so that you start to add more and more things to your list of that's which worthwhile looking at, until you stop making a list, because everything you see would get on that list.
Yeah, I suppose.
But that's a good point, is to start looking for those things. Start looking for you in the sense of your relationship to the store that you go to and the material goods that they have to sell there.
Yeah, I can, on top of my head, think of a number of things, just highest on the list. But I suppose that's the start. Figure out the greatest contributors.
Right, that exactly so. The things that are most likely to cause dissatisfaction should be the ones that are highest on the list to watch for, so that you can stay out of the way.
And then just fill in with the smaller and smaller pieces of the puzzle, so to speak.
Exactly, exactly. Because in fact, what you're actually doing is that this is actually what you could refer to in some schools as self exploration. Like the Greeks would say, know thyself. All right. Well, what you're doing is you're investigating all of the places that cause you trouble so that you can avoid those. That's a self investigation.
Avoid, or at least just be aware of.
Right. That's the important thing, is to investigate rather than try to solve it. The way to do it is to investigate it. Another way of talking about it would be hide and go seek. Have you ever heard of that game?
Yeah.
Okay. We turn it backwards. First, we seek it out. And after we understand it thoroughly enough, then we put it away. We hide it.
Yeah, because it isn't
Because we
needed.
see it now. We've got it. We caught it already.
That's a good analogy.
All right. So, is there anything else that we need to cover today? You got another question or so?
Actually, I do have another question, but
All right.
I don't know if it's something to record or it's just loose talk. No, it's actually it's not very related to what I'm focused on in the practice.
Do you want to turn the video recorder off?
Yeah, if you like.
All right. So, goodbye, folks.
Goodbye.